just to start over. Hi, I'm John Sears. I'm the lane coordinator for Vermont DEC. Pleasure to have you all here today as we talk about Power Automate. So because we are in state government, there are actually two platforms for Power Automate, which is why I recommend getting to Power Automate this way, going to any either SharePoint, Planner, anything with the 9 dots. Go ahead and click on there and click on Power Automate. You might have to go to all apps, but if you click on Power Automate, it should take you to something that looks a little bit like this. So now that we're all here, and I would encourage you all to follow along because we're actually going to build a Power Automate script today. So if you can follow along on a separate screen, I would encourage you to do so. If you can't, no big deal. I'm recording this so you can always go back over anything we do here. But so can everyone see Power Automate on my screen? Okay, great. So what is Power Automate and why do we care? Power Automate is a tool for automation. It lives in a sort of nether realm between like programming stuff and Office 365 stuff. And depending on how deep you want to go, there are elements of coding, but it's designed to be operated by the layperson, which is to say you don't have to know any coding, you don't have to know any syntax or anything like that, but it allows you to build and automate stuff that focuses on interactions primarily between Office 365 suite of products. There are a lot of caveats because we are a state entity. We have the government client, which has additional rules that aren't prevalent to everyone. You'll see up on the top left, we are gov.flow.microsoft.us. If you just Google Power Automate and go to where it takes you, that is not where it takes you. So, for example, if I just type Power Automate, let's just go ahead and go here. You'll notice that it says us.flow.microsoft.com. And that's different than gov.flow.microsoft.us. Now, that's an important distinction for reasons that we'll get into later. But for safety's sake, let's make sure we're in the gov.flow.microsoft.us environment. And we'll move forward from there. So we're going to go ahead and talk through the left-hand side here. So home is where we are now. You can search templates or tasks or industries here if you want to get started. It likes to recommend everybody's like first automate thing, which is save Office 365 email attachments to OneDrive. I use this. So basically, whenever I get an email that has an attachment in it, it will automatically download that file and put it in OneDrive in a folder called email attachments or something to that effect. You could go ahead and install that real quick if you want that type of service, but it's an example of the kind of services and effects that you can get from Power Automate. If you have any approval requests pending, they'll show up down here. There is a lot of workflow stuff built into Power Automate, which managers or staff, or if you have any workflow stuff, you can build it in to Power Automate. And then it goes into templates. I don't know why it's only showing me 2, but there are a bunch here. There are a bunch of services, which are the platforms that Power Automate can talk to and interactions that it can have. And then it sort of goes into its little sales pitch. So we're going to skip action items for now. My flows are where any flows that you have built or are building live. So you can see I've got quite a few. Actually, they all fit on one page, which is nice. This is what we'll be working on today, but we're going to build that together. If any of you were at my earlier training and you clicked the registration form to get emailed my my invitation for that training, that was done in Power Automate. I might slip up and call it Flow. It used to be called Flow, but now it's Power Automate. So if you hear me say flow, it means the same thing as Power Automate. Well, they do call them my flows. So I guess the individual things are flows, but the system is Power Automate. So yeah, and this system works to, you fill out a form and you get sent an invitation. I've got some here that are considerably more complex, some that are relatively simple. Those all live here. And you can create a new flow up here or import them. I have been known to move things from the general domain to the government domain. We can also create new flows right here with the Create tab. So this is where we start to talk a little bit about what Power Automate is and what it does. So Power Automate are automatically running scripts that do things when they are triggered. There are 3 different kinds of triggers primarily that we'll be dealing with. They are automated cloud flows, which is basically thing happens, start flow. So an example of that might be you get an email. So like that's a trigger for that automatically downloading attachments. The trigger for that is you get email with attachment, you download attachment. Another example might be you submit a form or you update a SharePoint list. These are triggered actions. Next up are instant cloud flows. Those are push button. So I press go, it does thing. And then the final one is a scheduled flow. So those are things that run on a set schedule. And you could specify every other month or twice a week or every 5 seconds, whatever makes sense for what you're trying to do, you can set up a schedule to have it do that thing. Those are the 3 primary ways that we trigger actions. I don't deal too much with desktop flows or business process flows. One of the things that you might experience as you start to explore the Power Automate world is premium features. There's a lot of nickel and diming stuff buried in here where it's like you need to pay money in order to have access to stuff. One of the limitations of the system in a not premium setup is that you can't touch databases. We can get around that using other tools, but by default, unless you're paying for a premium service, Power Automate's not going to talk to one of your program databases that are built in a standard database. Where things live and breathe, though, really is under templates. So there are a bunch of templates listed here. These are templates that are used. They're sorted by commonly used templates in the government client. So you can see sort of this number right here is how many people are using them, and you can see it kind of descends as you move on, starting with the most popular, which is that Save Office 365 email attachments for OneDrive. It's a great place to go if like you want to see what kinds of problems people are solving with Power Automate. If you don't have a problem or you're not sure where to get started, there are a lot of really cool templates on here. I've gotten a lot of really cool ideas for things to do here. It's also a great way for seeing how certain things work. So basically, it's a pre-built flow that you can use as a starting point to build out a more robust flow that fits your specific needs. Send a customized email when a new SharePoint list item is added. Start an approval when a new item is added. A lot of these are defined by their triggers. You see the SharePoint logo here. Each of these icons represents a different platform that it is interacting with. They're called connectors. And you can see right here on the left-hand tab, connectors. So everything you see here is something that Power Automate can converse with. You'll notice a number of them have premium listed. Like those are things you have to pay for to get. And you can see them like the Microsoft Dataverse stuff, so like database connections and things like that. You'll notice there are a lot of Office 365 products here. There are also some things that are not. So if we scroll down a little bit, you see RSS, Google Calendar, Twitter, Gmail. What's weird about the government client is you can either operate in the government client bubble, which is where your Office 365 things reside in the Azure system that the state has, or you can operate outside of it. So you can, I think, touch your Office 365 email using a different connector, or like Twitter and Gmail and stuff. You can build all that in, but you can't have them cross the streams. You can't have an external thing touch an internal thing, which is frustrating a little bit if you wanted to, let's say, submit a form, which once it's approved, it puts your post on Twitter. That's a thing that you theoretically could do, but can't because of the government partitioning that is currently set up. So before I move on, I want to discuss one last distinction between that government client and this other client here, which is number of runs. Every time a flow runs, it's a run. The gov.flow.microsoft.us has a whole bunch. I think it is capped, but like you'll almost never get it unless you're running something every couple of seconds or something. So you don't really have to worry about it. You can run things in this other one, but it is capped. So why would you even be here in us.flow.microsoft.com? It's templates. So there are a lot more templates here, because it's accessing the entire Office 365 community. So there are a lot more and more diverse array of templates that are available. So like I found a really cool idea on here, and then I exported it to the other platform so that I could actually run it. But you have to be careful, because if you ever find yourself on my flows and you're like, wow, this is blank, where are all my flows? It might be because you ended up on the wrong one. I've done that a few times. So that's why I want to draw your attention to it so you don't make the same mistakes that I do. All right. So that was a lot. Any questions on what we've talked about so far? That's sort of the framework. There's other stuff here, data, which I barely get into, monitoring, which I've never used, solutions, which I'm not even sure what's going to show up here when I click it. Any questions? You can raise your hands or drop something in the chat if you have anything. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. If other questions pop up, feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. Emily.
Sorry. Hi, John. I was just wondering if you could share maybe some examples of the types of flows that you use in your work, or if you have any insights on, or like ideas to get us thinking creatively about how we could apply this tool.
Sure. So there's a huge diversity of flows that are out there, and I recommend starting with the templates because that tends to solve simpler, more straightforward problems. I can give you an example of something really cool and complicated that I built to sort of show you like the scope of things that you can try and tackle. I hesitate to show it to you because like it is a little bit more complex, and we're going to build a really simple one here today. But I was getting sick and tired of, so I'm responsible for quarterly reporting on the lean projects that I oversee. And I got sick and tired of chasing people down every quarter to give me text updates so that I could compile them together into an email and send them out. So I wanted to stop doing that. So the question was, can I use Power Automate to automate that task that I don't like doing and doesn't actually require a lot of thought on my part, right? Like all I'm doing is taking people's text, putting them in a thing, and then sending the thing out. The answer is yes, you can. So I talked about the different kind of flows that you can create. One of them is the scheduled flow. So I set up on a quarterly basis a scheduled flow that emails everyone in a certain group to do something. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Planner. One of the really cool things with Power Automate is that it works with the full Office 365 suite. So if you want to be doing things in Teams or Outlook or Planner or SharePoint, although Teams is technically SharePoint, it's really, really cool, and the interactions are really, really cool. So I have on my Microsoft Planner board a list of projects that are under the Lean implementation bucket. So I have set up a script in Power Automate that when it runs, it will grab every single task in the Lean implementation bucket, send them an email saying, hey, your update is due. And it will send them a link to a SharePoint list to update their quarterly update. And when they do that, it will update Planner and move the task over, because what it does is it copies everything here over here into quarterly updates. And when people update their quarterly update, it marks the task complete. So I know that they've done it. So I don't have to go and check to see if they've done it. I can look right here and know that Bennett is still supposed to do this quarterly update that he was supposed to do on 5.1 at just a glance and see that it's not done. And it compiles them all together in a nice little SharePoint list that I could then distribute to anyone and everyone that is my quarterly update. I no longer have to compile it. I don't chase people down. I have multiple quarterly triggers. So that says, your update is due in a month. Your update is due in 2 weeks. Your update is due in 2 days. Your update is late. And they're almost identical scripts. I'm just running them at different points in the month. The most complicated thing was figuring out a way for all those pieces to fit together, because there's a lot of stuff that you might try and do things a certain way in Power Automate once you get comfortable with it, and then find out that's not possible yet. At the time I did it, there was no way of deleting planner tasks in Power Automate. I think there is now. They're continually updating features. All of the Microsoft 365 products are all on like these simultaneous development paths that are all getting updated through time. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at a very simple flow.
This
So
is so cool. Thank you.
yeah,
There's a lot of excitement in the chat about getting up to speed on using Planner as well, and how that could feed a lot of the work we do as professional cat herders. So
yep.
that's great.
And I'm going to help you develop a tool that might be really useful in that context. So let's go ahead and take a look at that Office 365 template that we talked about. So as you can see, when you click on a flow, you can click right here on this little link, or you can go straight to the edit button, but I'm just going to show you what an individual flow looks like. It'll show you all the connections that it's currently running. So it requires Office 365 and OneDrive for Business. It'll show you any past runs within 28 days. So basically you see each one of these runs an hour ago, 3 days ago, 3 days ago, 3 days ago. Basically every time I get an email with an attachment, it's running. And so there's a couple things you can do with it. If it was broken for some reason or doing something that wasn't intended, I can go ahead and turn it off. But we're going to go ahead and hit edit so that we can take a look at what the flow looks like. So this one's fairly straightforward. The first item at the top here is the triggering action. So it's what causes thing to happen. So I can go ahead and click on it and expand it. And it basically says, on a new email to the inbox with attachments, it will do something. That first one's the triggering action. And then we're going to apply to each attachment on the email, because some emails can come with multiple attachments. We are going to create a file with the attachments. You'll notice here what are called dynamic content. This is how you build your flows. You might add additional steps to a process, but it's populated with information that comes from earlier on in the process. This initial step of on new email is automatically grabbing everything related to that email. So you can see here, it's got the from, it's got the to, it's got the subject, it's got the body, it's got who's in the CC. And we can use that information for future steps along the process. In this case, we are going to select output from the previous step, which is attachments. And we're going to create a file. So you can, the default here is email attachments from Flow, but we could set that directory anywhere in OneDrive. if we've got a location that we wanted to go to or we want to create a new folder. The file name is the attachment's name, and the file content is the attachment's content. So it's just saying each one of these little tags is, again, content from that flow that was pulled on earlier up. Now, there is a condition here where conditionally, if it's not working, it will try again. There's cool error checking like that kind of built in, but that's a little bit advanced for right now. Let's go ahead and check out a flow that's a little bit more complicated. But before I move on, any questions about that right now?
John,
and again,
if you doing this report where attachments go to a file path, and how is that useful? So in your experience, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how some of these automated processes could be applied.
Yeah, so let's touch on a slightly more complicated flow and see if that answers your question.
Cool.
So, and I think I have to credit someone on your team here for this idea, which is the training registration thing, which I'll show you my version of it. So one of my favorite triggers for Power Automate scripts are form submissions. I love triggering things off of form submissions. So I have a very simple form, which is the Lean Leadership Registration form. You can see what that looks like here. It's two simple questions. It's job title and what would you like to see covered in the training series. When someone submits it, and we have 6 responses, I'd like to see that number get higher, but we have 6 responses right now. Every time that happens, it will do a thing. So when it runs, I want to get the response details because I want the information from that form. But I don't actually care about most of the fields in that form. When I click on this, there's only one item here, which is the unique response ID, because when a new response is created, that's the only field that gets brought in. So again, all I'm doing is clicking in here, and it will give me dynamic content. You can do things with expressions and combinations, and you can heavily modify this stuff to do very specific things. But for basic flows, you just need to grab the dynamic content. And if the dynamic content you're looking for is not there, it's a matter of going up higher in the process and adding a task to pull it. Adding tasks is relatively simple. You just find the spot in the flow where you want to add it. So whether it's at the end or in an intermediate step, you hit the plus sign and add an action. In this case, after we've got the response details, and best practices are actually to rename your steps. You can rename them whatever you want. These are all default names, but if you've got a big complicated flow and you want to keep track of what things are actually happening, you can rename them. Once we've got the responses, I want to attach my invitation, which I have saved in my OneDrive, which is my files training, Lean Leadership Training Series, ICS. I'm going to grab the content, and then I'm going to send an email. So here I have access to the information that is in this form, which is the responder's email. All I got to do is add that. I don't have to ask for it because by default, forms will collect that information as long as it's in your organization, because I didn't anonymize it. I say thank you for registering. Open the attachments to add the recurring meeting to your calendar. And then down here is where I name my attachment, which is Lean Leadership Training Series.ics, and I include the content, which is the file content that's identified right here. So a fairly simple way to manage attachment content, both coming and going. Any questions on that? Okay. Yeah.
John, I have a question. You had mentioned earlier that this can't really speak with databases. Can you automate extracting information from an Excel sheet if it comes as an attachment? like, oh, great, now search the Excel sheet for everything tagged as QUIP funds. Extract that into a new Excel sheet. Is that something you
Yeah,
can do?
you can do that to a certain degree. So we're going to go ahead and we can create another flow here. I'm just going to go ahead and do an instant flow, skip. So Excel is an option. Oops. So here's basically a quick list of all the stuff you can do with Excel. It's all of the actions that are Excel possible. Delete a row, get a worksheet, list rows in a table, update a row, add a key column, add a row, create a table, create a worksheet, get tables. So you could use get tables to get that information. The level of flexibility and control you have in Excel is not nearly as good as you'd have in SharePoint, for example. So if I do SharePoint,
Hey, John, a quick SharePoint question. When you say in SharePoint, do you mean an Excel file saved on SharePoint? Something else.
So SharePoint primarily means SharePoint lists or SharePoint files. You can pull stuff out of there. It's not something that I've done, but it should be fairly straightforward to get content in a SharePoint directory and then parse it with Excel. I like having the data in SharePoint lists versus having it in Excel if it's possible. I haven't done a lot of stuff with Excel in this stuff. I like to try and stay out of it if I can because it gets complicated in a hurry and then you have to start using functions to like parse things and space it out. Like there are a lot of intermediate steps with like Power BI being practical to like actually handle the data flows in a better way. But I'm always happy to if you've got a challenge that you want to try and tackle, like that we can work through it and try and figure that stuff out. But we'll come back to this in a second. So on this training registration, for example, so we have a bunch of runs here. I want to talk a little bit about testing. So if you want to save your flow here, you can run a flow checker to make sure everything's fine. It'll show you if there are any issues. There are not because this is a fully functional flow, right? You can also run testing. So you can do two kinds of testing. You can manually trigger an action. So for example, if I were to go in to the Lean Leadership registration and submit a form, or even if you just run preview and hit submit, that will work. So you can manually run it, or you can automatically do it. So if I already ran a submit on that to test to see if it works, I can use historical data to double check that it's working as intended. So I can use past runs to go ahead and test it. And what it'll do, and I don't want to run any of these because these are unfortunately human beings that actually did this, it will run through the entire process. Let me see if I can run one real quick so that you can see how that looks. So let's go ahead and do save Office 365 email. So I want to go ahead and I want to test this flow. I can hit test. I can run automatically with a recently used trigger. And I can say, okay, 1 hour ago, you downloaded this attachment. I want to do it again, just make sure it works. You hit the test button. It will test the flow. It will run through each step. It'll show you where, if anywhere, it gets stuck. My flow ran successfully, so I know that everything's working as intended. It didn't activate the condition. It just ran ahead and created the file. Just to show you how complicated this stuff can get, I'm going to go ahead and go through this quarterly update. So this is a 2-day reminder, 2 days before the end of the time. I have to go in and I have to find the right group for my planner. This is the planner icon. So planner, I have to find the right team, which is the A&R DEC team, the right plan ID. If you have multiple plans in a group, you got to pick the right one, which in this case is my Lean projects, and then apply to each. And for value, it's each task in this plan. And then I'm looking for plans where the bucket ID is the right bucket, which is to say lean implementation. Or in this case, it'd be quarterly updates, because this isn't the one that creates those new tasks. This one just reads them. And it says, okay, as long as it's not done, so as long as the percent complete is less than 100, go ahead and get the task. Go ahead and send a link to the SharePoint item for that ID, because I'm storing that ID on the SharePoint list. And then go ahead and find the person who is attached to the planner task and send them an email. So it might have to run multiple times, right? Which is why it's applied to each, because it's for each person in that task. Send them an email and tell them to do the thing. So you can see these things can get nested pretty quick, but all of these are just click item, find thing you need. They're all grouped by the various tasks that brought them in. And we can go ahead and find their various information. I had to pull their email addresses by who was assigned to the task. That's what the Office 365 icon here is. And then in that email, I send them a link to the title is due, the title of the planner task. An update is needed and there are only 2 days left. Please update the task and providing your lean quarterly updates by, and I'm conducting a formula here to tell them when it's due and providing them a link to the item, and then a bunch of details about what they need to do. And this is running on a quarterly basis. All right. I know that was a lot. And in order to kind of get a handle on this stuff, it's really about using it and trying it. So before we get started on actually building a flow, do we have any questions?
John, does this just apply to like anytime you're logged into a computer, or does it apply when you launch Teams, or like when are these active?
So they are being run on the cloud. So they are always active as long as your account exists. The only time that you will encounter any difficulties is if you are relying on a run from somebody else and they change jobs or move on. But as long as the account exists, these things will run. So it is another thing to think about as far as succession planning is what flows are people using and how are they using them? Because you don't want to lose a flow because someone has moved on to another opportunity. But it's very easy to take a flow. So say, for example, we love this quarterly update one. I want to go ahead and make sure that this lives on beyond me. I can hit export. I can export it as a package, and then it's really easy to import back in. So if I go ahead and I create a flow, where is it? Yeah, so under my flows, you can import, and it knows how to read those zip files or the JSON files, whatever version you export it as, it knows how to import it so that the next person, see right here, it's looking for the zip package that it created in that export, and it will automatically unload it. You may have to activate the connections, and you may have to tweak some other stuff, but the flow can live on, and it will always run in the background. So I don't have to worry about anything being on or off. I am always automatically saving attachments. I don't have to worry about the quarterly stuff not running. It's always going to run regardless. It's a great question.
John, is it highly likely that we've participated in a flow with you already?
Well, if you are on let's take a look at my flows. If you signed up for my training, if you were a manager, you might have interacted with this. I hope you've interacted with this because you want to take more training from me because I'm awesome. I have set up some really cool flows to notify the team when new responses are submitted. So I've set up a bunch of forms. So I have one form that is set up to allow people to submit the lean improvements that they've done, because I can't be a part of every continuous improvement effort across all of DEC. So if someone has something that they want to bring people's attention to, they can go ahead and interact with that form and submit that idea. And it will automatically post about that idea to teams for everyone to see. I've set up another one that's also triggered by a Microsoft form, which is if you have a lean idea, you can go ahead and use that. So I'm actually going to go ahead and show you an example here in Teams. So if we go ahead and go to Teams and we go to the DEC team, we go to Process Improvement, which is my sub channel. There's a spot here for idea submission. So if you have an idea that you want to explore and you think it's got potential for a continuous improvement project, you can go ahead and submit it. The bar is really low. You just list the division owner of the challenge, the section owner of the challenge, and what your improvement idea is. When you submit it, it actually creates a planner task over here in this tab. Yes, this tab. And it will automatically be populated in the to-do tag so that everyone that is a green belt can see, hey, there's a new continuous improvement opportunity. I'd like to work on that. That's how it would work in practice. In reality, I don't get that many of those. But if I did, they'd go here and then everyone could see them and be like, I'd like to work on that project, and they could assign themselves, or I could assign them if they're working on it. But you can certainly see the practical implications of practicing that. Let's see, got my quarterly updates. So you will have gotten those emails like I know Helen has from, yep, if you register for the Clean Water Lecture Series, you will have interacted with Power Automate, although not my scripts. Yeah, and then this one's personal. So you can use it for personal stuff or project group related stuff. There's no limit to what you can automate in your own life. If you're willing to change up your process a little bit to make it happen, because you might have to tweak something about the way you run things. All right, Jim, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and create a very simple flow here. So if you are playing along at home, go ahead and hit create. And once you've hit create, go ahead and hit scheduled cloud flow, because we're going to go ahead and create a scheduled flow. So by default, it will open up a window here that says build a scheduled cloud flow. In this case, we're going to go ahead and call it, I'm going to call it demo 2 because I already have a demo, but go ahead and cite demo 2, and we want to go ahead and run this flow. I don't think I want to run it every minute. I think I would like to run it every month. Or you know what, let's make it every 2 months. Starting when? Let's start it at the beginning of the month. So now every 2 months, starting 6/1 at 10 a.m., it's going to run this every 2 months. So I'm going to go ahead and create it. So this is typical of what you'll look at when you're starting a new flow from scratch. Again, I recommend looking at the templates because there are a lot of really cool examples there, not only of cool ideas that you can try and tackle, but also like see how those things are done, kind of like we're doing now, but in a it's already built. All you have to do is like change some stuff around to make it work for you scenario. So it's set to reoccur, and I can go back and I can change this. Like I don't have to set that in there, but I can expand it to the same information that was in that opening screen, which is setting the date and the time interval. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new step. So you guys need to send a lot of reminders, and the primary way you do that is with emails. So why don't we go ahead and set up something like that? So I know I want to send an email, so I'm just going to go ahead and type email in the little search bar here. And you're going to see a bunch of stuff pop up. I would try and stay away from the generic send an email notification and focus more on the Office 365 stuff, so Outlook. And we want to send an email. So we just do send an email v2. So you can just click on that. And it opens up a thing to customize an email. So you can expand it here or hide the extra options if you want. But to send an email to someone, and let's say I want to send an email to john.sears@vermont.gov, not Vermont.gov, you'll see that I show up here. So it's like double checking to make sure that that's right. The subject line is demo and the body is, this is a test. And if I go ahead and hit save, I've built an automatic email that's going to come to me every 2 months. It runs through it to make sure that it runs in theory. So we want to go ahead and we want to test it. Is everyone following along with me so far? I'm going to go ahead and hit test. And I can't automatically trigger it because there are no previous runs, but I can go ahead and manually trigger it, which because it's a timed flow, it means it's just going to run. So it's running my flow. Once I hit run flow, my flow ran successfully. So I can go to the flow runs page and it will show me all the flows that are running for this. And yep, it ran 15 seconds ago. Let's go ahead and check my email. There's my demo. This is a test. Just ran, automatically shows up. Now every 2 months, starting on 6/1, it's going to send me that email. I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and I can, in this main tab, just turn it off. So now it won't run. I can re-enable whenever I want to. We can also add additional steps. So let's say, for example, we don't just want to send an email. We want to send an email with some information in it. So this one I want to kind of leave open because I couldn't presume you had any of the stuff like a team setup or a planner setup. But I want to go ahead and I want to grab some planner information. And I want to go ahead and get a task. And I have to, okay. So the problem here is that I don't have task ID. Okay, so it's grabbing all of the tasks across my plans. So that's a little complicated. I'm going to go ahead and add an action above that. What I generally do is I just type the thing that I'm looking for, the tool, and I will go ahead and find it here. List my tasks. There we go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and delete that task. So you just click that ellipses and you can go ahead and hit delete. Now, if I want to add information to this email, you'll see I have more options. So I've got the title of the task. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to these are my tasks. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit space, and then I'm just going to click on title. Now it's going to send me an email for every task I have. And you see how it automatically did apply to each for each value, because it's listing my tasks and it's going to send me a list of all those tasks. That's not terribly practical, but I could, if I wanted to, take all of those tasks and bundle them together in a list and then put that list in an email and then send me that email. So I'm going to take this, oops, that isn't going to work because I am directly referencing this title. So if I take this out of here, now I should be able to carry it out. So now it's not in the apply to each. What I can do is that I can See, now we're getting into complicated land where basically what I need to do is I need to create a variable that has all that information. So I'm going to go ahead and hope this is the right one and use compose, where inputs are the value of the title. And now let's go ahead and see if I can, boy, try to do this live. I just wanted to show you how easy it is to add dynamic stuff. And you can customize this stuff and modify it. And I've never tried to do this, but basically what I would want to do is I would want to concatenate all of the tasks. So I can do concat value. Okay. I'd have to figure it out. A little bit's trial and error, and a little bit of it is figuring things out. But you could very easily. Oh, there it is. Why is it there? I don't know, let's try current item and see what happens if I run it. I need to enable my flow. See, it likes to check me. Oh, it does not like apply to each. Okay. When you get into these composed things get a little messy, so I apologize for that. But this is an example of how these things work and how development goes. Any question there? My very successful, very easy thing.
It certainly seems like a tool that you just need to be brave and realize as you dig into it, you can start to piece the pieces together. I'm not 100% sure how to use it right now, but this training is really helpful this training. Sorry, John, I mean, I don't mean to discourage your training. This training has been incredibly valuable. And it's something that I bet once you start practicing it, you can realize more opportunities of how it applies to your work and practice the tool. Apologies for not eloquently saying that. But yeah, I would love to hear from folks what kinds of ideas you have about how you could incorporate this into your workflows. I was just putting in the chat, I might set one up to send our weekly report reminders.
Yeah, so here's a more clear example. So I listed off my tasks. So now I'm going to post a message in Teams with the titles of all of my projects in the A&R Greenbelts team. I have a subchannel set aside for testing, so this is exactly what it's for. I'm going to go ahead and run this. This should not experience any issues. I will have to manually trigger it. So let's go ahead and test and see how it goes. Got to turn it on. Let that be a lesson to you, not to turn off your flows. All right, let's go ahead and test it. Test. Flow is running. Successfully listed tasks. It is looping through apparently 34 tasks that I have. It shows you the elapsed time that it takes to run. It's looping through each one of those tasks. Let's go ahead and check out things in test. You can see it's showing up there. Arlene 2, Lean Learning Series 2, Grow Coaching. Every single one of my tasks posted. And you can see it took me 2 minutes to build that. It worries me that it's still running, but you could see it in practice. Yeah, the first question you'll always have is, I wonder if I can do this in Power Automate, if you start thinking that way. And then some things you will and some things you won't. But it's always worth taking a look at. And I always advise people to be careful not to automate waste. Take a look at your process and make sure the process makes sense so that we're not creating more work for ourselves. I especially wanted to show you how to schedule those emails so that you can get out of the world of sending Outlook calendar invites and things like that. Although you can trigger stuff off that too, but this is a little bit more elegant. I'm concerned that it's still running. I guess I stopped it. But anyway, that's Power Automate. If you're not alone if you try and tackle a Power Automate thing. Right now, for example, I was working with Shalini to basically, she was dealing with all these amendment requests. So we built a Microsoft form to kick off the process of, I want to do an amendment request. Here's a bunch of information. It was creating a task in Planner and then taking the information from that form and automatically submitting it to the next stage of the process, which was the TPM. And then in that email, it would have a link to the next form that the TPM needed to complete. And so when the TPM did it, it would take that task, move it to the next bucket. And so it's like automated tracking in addition to like carrying forward information, allowing people to use exactly the information. And there are actually 4 steps of that. So each one is like, move the planner task automatically collect the information you need, and automatically moving down the process. And she, when she wants to oversee the process, all she has to do is look at her planner and see like, I've got 6 different amendment requests. This is the state that each one is at and who it's waiting on and how long it's been waiting there, because you can do all that stuff with Planner. So it's really powerful, and I really like Power Automate. But I would encourage you, if you want to get started, to check out the templates and ask yourself if, yeah, I would like to be able to have that happen automatically, or I could do something very similar to that. That's where I got started. And if you get stuck, I'm available as a resource to help you try and puzzle through it. All right, we're at 2 minutes. Any questions?
I'm sure there will be more as we start using this, but yeah. Any other questions? Really appreciate this training, John. I'm so excited to think about as we're going about our day-to-day, looking at it from this angle of, can we automate some of this, but also appreciate your point about not automating waste. And if there's better ways to build our processes to begin with, we'll continue to think about that as well.
Yeah, and it helps to think of, I like to think of SharePoint as like a version of a database that Planner can, or that Power Automate can really play with. It plays really, really nice with Outlook and Teams in particular. So consider those, and it works really well in conjunction with Planner and Forms. That's like my favorite group of 4. There is Forms, Planner, SharePoint, or Outlook, and Teams.
Cool.
Yep. All right. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed that, and you've enjoyed seeing my smiling face.
Yeah, always.
So thank you all very much. And if there are no
Great.
more questions, I'll hop off.
Thank you, John. Round of applause.
Always happy to help. And if anyone wants to talk to me about, could this work in Teams or whatever, just go ahead and message me, and we'll figure it out.
Sounds great. Thanks, John.
Yep. Have a good afternoon.
Have a good afternoon.